In this video we continue our 240 big ear challenge, we rack up some lifers and I get into trouble. Where are we going?
To Lamp Meadow.
What might we see there?
A Richardson cackling goose. There we go.
Yeah.
And a green-winged teal.
Excellent. When we arrived after our hour's drive, it was freezing. Hey folks, we're here at Lamp Meadows. We are looking for both an American green-winged teal, see Kaylee there scanning behind me, and also a Richardson's cackling goose, which is a green-winged teal. Right, 1 second. As Kaylee set up the scope, I looked on the pool and the embankments nearby to see what was here. Initially seeing quite a lot of geese. There were quite a few grey-lag geese, but the most numerous by far were the Canada geese here. There were a good number of ducks present. Most were roosting, like the shoveler you can see at the back of this film behind the Canada goose at the edge of the water. There were a few birds in the water with the geese. Also on the embankment there were plenty of ducks. This one wasn't roosting, this was a male gadwall that was preening, giving us some great views in the sun. The sleepy birds weren't completely restricted to the embankments. Here's a teal that was in the water by some reeds, also asleep. It didn't take long for Kaylee to pick out the bird we were looking for, which guess what? Have you got it? Excellent. Was also asleep. This species is the American version of our teal, with a couple of plumage differences, which I'll talk about in a little bit. We have visited this duck once before Christmas. It was asleep then too, although on that occasion it did lift its head briefly. We did watch it for some time, but it did not wake up. Regardless, it was a lovely bird to see, and this time we had some brilliant sunlight, so it looked really nice. After ticking off the green-winged teal on our year list, our task now was to find a Richardson's cackling goose. This species is another visitor from America, and although it's very, very small, it does have almost the same plumage as a Canada goose. So we set about searching through all the Canada goose present. This was quite some task. There was us and a few other birders there as well. Hey folks, so we've got our green-winged teal, although it is asleep. I'm going to try and go back in a minute and see if it's woken up. We can't find the Richardson's cackling goose though. It's not yet. It's not where it's been reported, but there's a lot of Canada geese here.
There's a lot of pools of water.
There's a lot of pools of water, yeah. So we're going to go searching. So stick with us. This would be good if we could find it because it's a lifer. We walked around a muddy track to a larger piece of water where there was a group of geese on the far side against the reed beds. Please excuse any of the upcoming footage being a little shaky as it was very windy. Initially I picked out this small goose, the brown one, at the back, which is a pink-footed goose. And on the bank to the right of me there was another species feeding, which is a barnacle goose. These are really attractive black and white geese. Although we'd quite happily ticked another couple of species off of our year list, we still hadn't found our target and were starting to lose hope until I spotted something on the far bank against the reeds. It took me a moment to realise, but this is our cackling goose. If you look as best you can, I know it's far away, but the goose is very small, with a sloping forehead and a tiny bill. This individual swam alongside the reeds and soon it was with some other geese. Here we could see the difference in size between it and the Canada geese that it was hanging around with. At the end of this clip you can see it against a pair of mallard, and it's really not much bigger. And although we were freezing and being blasted by the wind, this was amazing and we were very happy. It's a lifer. Soon the cackling goose moved right and was obscured by some reeds, so I thought I'd go back to see if the green-winged teal had woken up yet. When I arrived back at the pool I noticed some new arrivals there, a pair of goosander. The female soon left the male, who sat there in the sun preening, looking very majestic. I soon refound the green-winged teal. It had moved slightly but not very far, and it was still asleep. It had been joined on the left-hand side by a snipe. Despite all the commotion around the green-winged teal with the snipe and some other teal swimming and feeding around it, it didn't stir very much at all. If you have a look behind the teal now, there's a moorhen feeding behind it. There's another bird for our year list. It was at the point where most of my extremities were about to fall off with the cold when a sparrowhawk flew over and spooked everyone. Finally, we got to see the green-winged teal when it wasn't asleep. It first got run over by a coot that was very eager to get away, and then sat in the water and kind of collected itself. At this point, like the last video I showed this bird in, I'll just quickly explain the differences between our teal and the green-winged teal. As you can see in this still, our teal, which is the one in front, has a horizontal white line against the base of its wing, whereas the green-winged teal has a vertical one running from the shoulder down. We now headed back to the car to try and thaw out and figure out what's next. Hey folks, pretty successful trip to Lump Meadows. Excuse the bouncy road. We got both birds we wanted. The green-winged teal finally stuck its head up after sleeping for most of the time we were there, and we got finally the Richardson's cackling goose, which took a bit of a search to find, but eventually I spotted it amongst some Canada geese. We're heading off now. We haven't got much time, but we're going to nip to Burton Mere Wetlands RSPB, just have a quick half an hour there, see if we can pick up any more species. It took around 45 minutes to get to RSPB Burton Mere Wetlands. This is our most local RSPB reserve, so one we visit reasonably regularly, but today we didn't have much time at all. We initially did pick up one of our species which wasn't on our year list yet, this lovely blue tit, and then we walked towards the screen which was halfway through the reserve to see if there were any wildfowl. When we arrived, there wasn't that much at all. There was a small amount of shovelers, and on the opposite side there were a few widgeon, like this pair that were swimming against the reed bed. Unfortunately though, we did have to head back towards the car and to go and pick the girls up from school. On the way back, we did spot this wood pigeon that was sat sunbathing on a tree, and also a very common bird, especially in the winter, the bird that's on a lot of Christmas cards, the robin. This individual, being extremely confiding, sat on a tree very near us. But now it was time to go and do the school run and leave the birds and this squirrel behind. A few days later, whilst I was away with work. Hey folks, I am down very south in Penzance, St Ives area. I've been on a work conference for the company that I work with, but I thought with a couple of hours before it went dark, I would see what birds were around. My first stop was a place called Gulval, which was in kind of a housing estate. Golden Oriole had turned up. So when I arrived, there was another birder there who recognised us from our channel, which was ace to see. If you're watching, really nice to meet you. There was another couple of other birders there, and we saw it fly around. Unfortunately, we struggled to locate it again, and as we were kind of walking back to the car, it showed up in a tree right next to us. I originally spotted it flying up into the tree from the ground, but it was hidden in the tree, finally coming to the side so we could just about pick out what it was. And although mobile and partially hidden most of the time, it was obvious. No other bird looks quite like this. This individual isn't quite as bright as the grown male, who's bright yellow and black, but still a very pretty bird, and very unusual to see at this time of year, with most sightings being in the summer. This isn't my first attempt to find this bird, which unfortunately back in the spring in Suffolk led to failure. We heard a male but didn't see one. This time I was happy. So I managed to get some footage as it was moving through the tree, but it was a bit sporadic and quite mobile, but super bird to see. And then I've come to where I am now, but it's a beach, and there's a Bonaparte gull here. After being greeted by this not very shy-pied wagtail who was right in front of me on the seawall, I wandered down to the beach and to the tide line, where there was a lot of gulls. One thing I did pick up on quite quick was the number of Mediterranean gulls. In the north where we live, we don't often see that many of them. Here though, their numbers were matching the usually very common black-headed gull. It didn't take me too long to find a gull that looked out of place. This gull was very small, and it had a black bill, a bit like our little gull. There are a few distinct differences, one large one being the Bonaparte's gull has a white underwing as opposed to the little gull which has a dark underwing. I did see the Bonaparte's gull lift its wings at one point, so this was quite a good confirmation. I was able to get reasonably close to the gull so I could get some great footage. This is a beautiful bird, and one I have looked for once in the past and failed, so I was over the moon not only to see it and tick it off our year list and life list, but to see it at such close quarters. Excellent. It's here. I've also seen greater blackback gull, I've had Mediterranean gull, so I've managed to tick quite a few birds off the list, and there's been some quite nice pied wagtail and rock pipit about as well. But it's late and I've got a 6.5 hour drive to get back home to Kaylee, who's probably going to kill me for seeing these two birds without her, but hey ho. Hey folks,
Where are we going?
we're going to Bala Lake. A couple of days after returning home, and when I was out of trouble, I think, we took a drive out to Bala Lake in North Wales, where someone had reported a ringneck duck. It was an extremely cold wintry day, and when we arrived there wasn't much action on the lake at all. I spotted this lovely great crested grebe that was fishing, and a few other ducks, but generally just mallards. We drove around the lake a bit to see what else we could see, the winner that day really being the scenery. How epic is that? We saw on the opposite side some geese. This group mainly being Canada geese, but if you spot on the left there's a few pink-footed geese, and also if you look carefully in the middle of the picture on the left there's a grey-lag goose. There's also some widgeon on the right hand side. Although we didn't get our target species, the ringneck duck, we did pick up another couple of birds for our year list, like this dunnock that was hopping about in the trees, and this nuthatch that spent a long time trying to avoid me, but ended up coming down to eat eventually. And although not particularly fruitful for birding, we did see this amazing British Air Force plane pass us by, really low over Bala Lake, and we got to see some of the incredible scenery around the lake itself. Also on the way back we nipped into Clocheenog Forest, and although very quiet for birds, I'll leave you with this picture of the frozen pond. Thanks so much for watching. Please like, please subscribe, and please press the notification bell. Unfortunately next week we won't be doing a video because Kaylee's mum is getting married. But our 240 bird challenge